Anthony Davis, one of only 2 real people in a city of 20 million, caught the burrito his partner tossed to him. "Which side is the mustard on?" he asked. "Mustard," Chaz replied. "Who puts mustard on a burrito?" "You. Which side?" Chaz grinned, showing perfect white teeth. They were fake. After taking that bar stool to the face 2 years back, he'd gotten one replaced, and had never liked how different it looked. By this point, he'd had most of them replaced. "Mustard is on the left side," Chaz said, nodding to the burrito. "How'd you guess?" David just grunted, ripping off the corner of the burrito, beans, cheese, and beef, and mustard. Chaz clung to this stupid belief that someday his partner would happen upon a mustardy bite and convert. Davis shook his head and tossed the ripped-off chunk of the burrito into a dumpster. The two strolled down the street, wearing plain clothes. The vast city of New Clipperton enveloped them, so real one would never be able to tell it was a snapshot, a recreation of a specific day in the real city. Using methods a simple cop like Davis struggled to understand, the entire city had been reproduced in a vast cavern. It didn't look like a cavern to him. He saw a sun overhead and smelled the stench of the alleyway they passed. It all felt real to him. In a way, it was real, built from raw matter. You could touch it, smell it, hear it, and, as evidenced by the bite Davis took of his burrito, taste it. Damn, he'd missed some of the mustard. "You ever wonder," Chaz said, talking with his mouth half full, "how much these burritos cost? Like, for real? The energy to create them and stick them in here so we can buy them?" "I'd guess millions," Davis said, that took another bite. "And nothing at the same time." "Huh? Kind of like how you can say things but have them mean nothing at the same time?" "This snapshot is the sunk cost, Chaz," Davis said. "You either recreate the day exactly or there's no point. Our burritos, the graffiti on the walls over there, the woman you're leering at, all part of the package." "She is fine though, eh?" Chaz said, turning around and walking backward as he watched the woman. "Have a little decency, Chaz." "Why? She's not real. None of them are." Davis took another bite of burrito. His taste buds couldn't tell that it wasn't real. Of course, what did it mean to be real? The beans and cheese had been modeled after a real burrito in the real city, and it was exacting down to the finest minutia. It wasn't just some virtual simulation. If you placed this burrito beside one from the real world, even an electronic microscope wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. "The burritos cost a fortune to make," Davis said, "but you couldn't recreate a day without them. So it's not like we're eating up millions that wouldn't have been spent if we hadn't decided to have lunch. The burritos would still be sitting there waiting to be bought. So it costs a fortune and nothing at all for us to eat them." Chaz grunted. "Wonder who bought them in the real city?" It was a good question. This snapshot had been created overnight and was the exact replication of the 1st of May. It would be deleted, reconstituted back into raw matter and energy at midnight. Chaz and Davis were real, though. From the outside, the real life. Their introduction, while necessary and kind of the point of making the snapshot in the first place, introduced errors. Their interactions would create deviations from the way the real day had played out back some 10 days ago. The longer the simulation ran, the more the deviation percentage, factored by statisticians at the DA's office, would rise. Early in the morning, they could say with over 99% certainty that what Chaz and Davis saw would be accurate representations of events in the real day. That percentage would erode through the day. Late afternoon would often be something like 80% accurate. That might seem like good odds at a casino, but to a jury, a 20% chance of inaccuracy could kill a case. So eating the burritos did have a cost. He never knew what would create deviations. Once he'd locked himself away in a police safe room in a hotel, determined not to create any deviations. Unfortunately, in slamming his door, he'd woken up a woman staying in the hotel. She had then made it to an interview on time, and that had sent ripples through the entire snapshot, ruining the case. They'd had to recreate the day a second time, which looked terrible on the department's expense reports. Nobody had blamed him. Cops in the snapshot would introduce deviations. It was the nature of what they did. Still, it haunted him. And here, everyone else was fake, but he and Chaz, they were somehow something worse. Flaws in a perfect system. Intruders. Little viruses leaving chaos in their wake. "It doesn't matter," he told himself as he finished the last of the burrito. Eyes on the mission. The department's shrink told him to focus on what he was doing, his task at hand. He simply couldn't function if he fixated on deviations. The two made their way to the corner of 3rd and 22nd, near little rows of shops. Convenience stores, a liquor shop with bars on the windows, random stickers from this band or that plastered on the back of the stop sign nearby. This wasn't the nicer area of the city. There weren't many of those left anyway. Davis called up the mission parameters on his phone, looking them over. "I think we should stand inside," Davis said, gesturing toward the liquor store. "It makes it hard to chase somebody." "Yeah, but he won't see us. No deviations." "Deviations can't be stopped." He was right. When their actions were audited by the bean counters and legal, the language was always about minimizing deviation, risk, and targets, never about stopping them. Still, Chaz didn't argue further as Davis positioned them inside the liquor store, which was open despite it not even being noon yet. This place smelled clean, more like a drugstore than a den of vice. A Sikh man swept the floor near the front counter, bearded, with a sharp red turban. He regarded them curiously as they sat up near the window looking out on the street. Davis read the mission parameters again, then checked his watch. Half an hour. Not much time. They shouldn't have stopped for breakfast, despite Chaz's complaining. The shopkeeper continued his sweeping, eyeing them periodically. "He's going to be trouble," Chaz noted. "We're just two normal patrons who didn't buy anything and who are now staring out the window, one of us checking his watch every 15 seconds. I'm not..." Davis was interrupted as the shopkeeper finally set his broom aside and came walking over. "I'm going to need you to leave," he said. "I need to close for, lunch." Davis smiled, preparing a lie to placate the man. Chaz flashed his badge. It looked normal to Davis, just a silvery shield with the usual important-looking embossing on the like. Nothing abnormal about it, except it was a reality badge. To anyone from the Snapshot, to anyone who was a dupe, a fake person, it wouldn't look like a normal shield at all. Instead, it was certification that the men bearing it were real, and equally, certification that you were not. The Sikh man stared at the badge, eyes widening. Davis had always wondered what it was they saw. They got that same far-off look in their eyes, as if they'd stared into something vast, stunned, even a little in awe. Has a dupe of me ever seen one of those? He wondered. In a city sometime, thinking it was the real me, completely ignorant of the fact that he and his entire world was just a snapshot. The shopkeeper shook himself and looked at them. "Hey, that's a neat trick. How'd you make it?" He trailed off, looking down at the badge again. Everybody knew about them. Reality badges were a favorite of cinema these days. Almost every cop drama you could download was about men working inside a snapshot. The writers always made it seem more exciting than it was. And they never showed what the reality badge looked like on screen. It was some kind of unwritten rule. It was better in your head. The shopkeeper whispered something softly in his native tongue. Then he looked at them again, more somber. Chaz nodded to him. The shopkeeper took it well. He just wandered off. He pushed out the door of his shop in a daze, leaving it all behind. Why work a retail job when you just found out you weren't actually real? Why bother with anything when your entire world was just going to end at the setting of the sun? "Want anything to drink?" Chaz asked cheerfully as he tucked his badge away into his front pocket. He nodded to the now unguarded liquor store. "You didn't need to do that," Davis said. "We only have a few minutes left. No time for chit-chat. This was the best way." He'll introduce deviations. "There's no way to stop..." "Shut it," Davis said, slumping against the window and checking his watch again. "Sometimes I hate you, Chaz." Though he envied Chaz at the same time. He'd be better off if he could just start viewing everything in here, even the people they passed, as fake. Puppets created from raw matter and animated for just a short time. It was just that they were exact reproductions, right? Down to their brain chemistry. How could you not see that as a real person? They ate burritos, treated them real, but were at the same time supposed to pretend that the people they met were nothing more than raw material? It didn't seem right. Chaz squeezed him on the shoulder. "It's better this way. He'll be able to enjoy what's left of his life, you know?" He dug into his pocket, then dropped a handful of change on the windowsill. "Here, from the burrito stand." Chaz wandered off to dig out a beer. Davis stewed, then checked his mission parameters again. 2 cases today. The one out on the street corner, then another on Warsaw Street at 817. Deviation percentage would be high by then, but they could still do some good. Help cases going in the real world. Get information to the real cops. And Warsaw Street, 817. Davis finally took the handful of coins and began sifting through them, holding up each to the sunlight through the window, checking the date. Chaz sauntered back over, then shook his head at Davis. "We could go to a bank, you know, ask them for an entire bucket of coins." "Wouldn't count," Davis said, frowning at the quarter he was holding. Did he have 2012? He pulled out his phone, scrolling down. "Wouldn't count," Chaz said. "By what rules?" "By my own rules." "Then change the rules." "I can't," Davis said. Yeah, he'd found it 2012 already. It was 2010 he needed. They were almost out of circulation now, these old coins. All coins, really. Hard to find a place that dealt in real cash these days. And the street vendors, maybe the occasional convenience store. "You do realize," Chaz said, "how much more difficult you make your life sometimes, don't you?" "Sometimes," Davis admitted, "but I can't cheat or the collection will lose all meaning. Besides, Hal knows the rules." Davis had an email from him last week. The kid had finished a complete set of the 2020s. Hal had a real old-fashioned soda machine in his school that gave out real money change. "Let's say you find one in here," Chaz said. "Some little bit of metal that happens to have the right stamp on it, to make you all freaked out or whatever. What would you do? We can't take anything out of the Snapshot." "Unless it's inside us," Davis said, nodding to Chaz's beer. "You'd eat the coin? Sure, why not? What are the precinct bean counters going to do? Search my stool?" Chaz took a long drink of beer. "You're a strange little dude, Davis." "You're only now figuring this out?" "I'm slow," Chaz said. "And you're like subtly weird, Davis. You're like stealth weird." Davis's watch buzzed, and he checked the time. 5 minutes. He leaned in, watching the building across the street, a bar with some apartments on top. Chaz reached for his holster under his arm. "You won't need that," Davis said. "A man can dream, can't he?" But he did let go of the gun. What makes this guy special? What makes this guy special, anyway? 1,000 murders a year in the city, and this one gets a snapshot? Davis didn't answer. Seriously, couldn't Chaz be bothered to check the news once in a while? They barely heard the shot that went off across the street. Standing where they were, the little pop could have almost been anything. Someone flinging a bottle at a dumpster, a car noise, even a door slam. Davis jumped anyway. The target, Enrique Estevez, hurried out of the apartment stairwell a minute later, hands shoved in his pockets. He looked around, nervous, then set off down the street. Not quite at a run, but still obviously agitated. "I'm off," Chaz said. "Don't let him see you." Chaz gave him a look that somehow conveyed the emotion. "What, you think it's my first day?" Then he was out the door, tailing Estevez, phone in hand. Davis ducked out a moment later, turning down an alley, following the map on his phone towards 6th. He would wait at the last point Estevez had been seen on the real day, in case Chaz lost the tail. Davis called Chaz on the phone. "How's he looking?" "Nervous," Chaz said over the line. "Street's gone empty, only a handful of people here. Should I take pictures of anyone so the IRL cops can search out witnesses?" "No," Davis said, "too suspicious." "And what would they witness? That Estevez was on the street? Just tailing." "Right," Chaz said. "Hold up. He just turned toward 8th. Davis stopped in place. It was the wrong direction. "You sure?" "Yeah, is this a problem?" "He was seen on 7th in a few minutes," Davis said. "Is he turning back?" "No, we're heading up, crossing avenues. Seems determined now, not looking around as much." Davis cursed quietly, turning on his heels and heading back up the alleyway at a swift pace. The eyewitness who claimed to have seen Estevez on 7th was wrong. Either that or a deviation had sent their subject in the wrong direction. If that were the case, this entire snapshot would be a wash. "I'm moving parallel to you," Davis said, trying to keep himself from getting nervous. "You to 8th yet?" "Just past it," Chaz said. "Davis, he just ducked into an alleyway, heading south. It's going to be really hard to follow him without looking suspicious." They couldn't risk that. If Estevez got suspicious, it would create a ton of deviations in his behavior. "I'm to the south," Davis said. "I bet I can catch him." He stopped in a corner, trying to hide the fact that he was puffing from the short jog. He would never have passed fitness requirements for in-real-life field work, not anymore. Still, he'd gotten into position fast enough to catch sight of Estevez leaving the alleyway ahead. He turned on the same street as Davis, heading east. "I've got him," Davis said, strolling along, trying to look nonchalant. "Just another guy talking on his phone. Nothing to notice or worry about." Damn, he was already feeling nervous. Stupid. This was a simple chase. He could do this without becoming a wreck, couldn't he? "Nice work," Chaz said. "I'm heading east on my street, parallel to you." "Roger." Davis kept pace with Estevez, watching while trying to look like he wasn't. The target was a thin man, but taller, more intimidating than his mud shots had made him seem. He'd made a big mistake, not just in murdering a man, but in picking the man to murder, the mayor's nephew. This was already ramping up to be a big case for the prosecutor, who felt he'd have heavy hitters in the city leaning on him. Unfortunately, their case against the accused wasn't strong, so they'd subpoenaed for a snapshot. These days, everyone had little machines in their blood, keeping watch for cancer and heart disease. Same thing crawled over the skin of the city, cleaning up pollution and radiation, keeping the place relatively safe, smog notwithstanding. You never noticed them, but they were everywhere, and everyone, crawling on things, microscopic, like little metal bacteria. And it turns out the data they recorded could be coordinated, dumped into a database. Privacy watchdogs had lost their minds when they learned of this. A flurry of laws and restrictions later, you had this. The state could get a court order allowing them to recreate a day, but otherwise couldn't touch the data. You could send detectives into a snapshot, but you actually had to have men on the ground, looking. Real police work. It sat better with the public than a bunch of abstract simulations inside a computer. The red tape was frustrating, but it meant that Davis had a job. Besides, there were advantages to this as opposed to abstract simulations. This way you could put a cop on the stand to testify of what he'd actually seen. Juries responded to that sort of thing. He was proud of how he stayed on Estevez's tail without seeming to alert the man, like a real cop. Chaz met him at an intersection, and the two kept tail as Estevez called someone on the phone. They were too far back to hear anything, but the end result was that the man knelt down on the side of the street and fumbled with something, then stood and darted away down another alleyway. Chaz cursed, speeding up, but Davis caught him on the arm. "He's getting away," Chaz said, reaching under his arm for his gun again. "Let him," Davis said, relaxing. "This is what we've been waiting for." "This?" Davis walked to the place where Estevez had knelt. Storm drain on the side of the road. He peered down, then reached in with his phone and took a few pictures. He held it up, scrolling between them until he found a good shot. A handgun lay in the filth of the drain. "Murder weapon," Davis said, standing up and showing Chaz. "The real-life detectives have been searching for this in all the wrong places." He attached it to a message and sent it to Maria, their liaison, and the precinct headquarters. "Murder weapon found," he wrote. "Storm drain in front of a beauty salon on 21st, between 10th and 11th. "I ain't just letting him go," Chaz said, folding his arms. "You hate not being able to get in some kind of gunfight," Davis said back. His watch buzzed and he glanced at the phone. "Intel received. Nice work. Between 10th and 11th? That's far from where you should have been." "Eyewitness is wrong," Davis sent back. "Estevez went east after the murder, not west." "Chance of a deviation?" Maria sent. "Ask the bean counters," Davis replied. "I'm just reporting what I found." "Roger. Sending its team to that gutter in real life. Stay close in case they need to follow up." Davis showed the phone to Chaz. "So," Chaz said, looking around, "we have some time. You want to head to Ingrid Street?" "It's noon," Davis said dryly. And it's the school day. Hal won't be out yet." "Oh, right. What then?" "Well, we had some $1 million burritos," Davis said, nodding toward a diner down the street. "Shall we have some $1 million coffee to wash them down?" And we will stop there.